homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm, or welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are making a copycat of the sweet kale salad from Costco. And I don't know about you guys' history with Costco. I have mostly lived in fairly small towns for the last 20 plus years. Towns that are, around 30,000 people and were too small for a Costco. And so for me to shop at a Costco, I had to go way out of my way and drive, an hour or more. And it was just never a priority for me. The few times that I was in one, I did some price comparisons and realized that I didn't think the food products were particularly less expensive than what you could get in a regular supermarket if you were paying attention to sales. But just recently, in the last year or so, we finally decided to go ahead and get a Costco membership. We have a Costco that's about an hour away from us, and we get up there maybe once every quarter, so 3 or 4 times a year. And it's been fun, and I've gone down that rabbit hole of watching other YouTubers that do Costco hauls where they show what they got at Costco, and I've Googled top 10 things to buy at Costco in terms of food and that kind of thing. And I have found some products that I really like that are kind of unique to Costco. So it's been fun to have a Costco membership. And one of the things that always gets recommended from Costco is their sweet kale salad. And of course, if you're buying something from Costco, you can't buy a small amount. And so they come in a 14-ounce bag, and there's 2 of them, so you have to buy 2. And so I went ahead and indulged in that and decided to give it a try not too long ago. And we did really enjoy it. It is a really good salad, but it was also one of those things where I'm a farmer and a gardener and I grow lots of things. And so I really wanted to figure out, how do I make this at home? Because it seems like there's no reason why I couldn't just make this at home. And so I did what you do in these situations, which is I Googled copycat recipe sweet kale salad Costco. And doing that, and then also comparing the ingredients on the bag. And generally ingredients are listed in the order by weight. And so I had some idea of what the different vegetables were in this, what were the ingredients in the poppy seed dressing. And I have a lot of those in my garden right now. What I didn't have was Brussels sprouts. And I also don't have any fresh cabbage. And so I did end up buying a cabbage and some Brussels sprouts for this. And if I were to do this again, I would probably just leave the Brussels sprouts out. They're the last ingredient in terms of the list of ingredients. And so they're not a huge part of what's in here. And Brussels sprouts, if you are conscious at all of buying in season, they're definitely a fall crop. If you've ever tried to grow them, they take a very, very long time to mature, like ridiculously long time to mature. And in my area, they tend to get aphids really badly. And so the one time that I tried to grow them, I was just fighting aphids for the entire spring and the entire summer. And then they never really headed up very well before it got too cold and the plants died. And so, yeah, I'm not going to be growing a lot of Brussels sprouts. And I'm not really on that Brussels sprout bandwagon that's happened in the last couple of years, where you see them roasted as an appetizer in all kinds of bougie restaurants. I can take them or leave them. I think a Brussels sprout tastes like a small cabbage, and I can grow the heck out of cabbage. And so I'm just going to add more cabbage if I do this recipe again and leave the Brussels sprouts out. But I wanted to make it as true to the original as I could when I started. And then, of course, I have lots and lots of kale this time of year. May, June is kind of the height of beautiful kale season. And then the recipe called for broccoli stalks, shredded broccoli stalks. And I actually have some Chinese broccoli that I can use for that. And so you'll see that in the recipe as well. Yeah, so it came out quite good, and we will definitely be making this again. And I love how you can just throw, a protein on top of this and basically have it as a dinner salad. So garden fresh sweet kale salad. Let's get started.
So the recipe that I'm riffing on here is from Perry's Plate, which is a blog. And I changed some things up, of course, because that's what you do. But here's my Brussels sprouts, my sad Brussels sprouts that are probably, they've either been in cold storage all winter or they came from very far away. And they were a little bit buggy. And that's actually one of the problems with growing Brussels sprouts, is they tend to get all kinds of little bugs inside all those little nooks and crannies that are very hard to control. And so I ended up having to toss a couple of these just from bug damage alone. And sometimes I trimmed around it. I'm not horribly picky about that kind of stuff, but, within reason. And then I peeled off the outer leaves that were discolored or sad, and then just trimmed off that bottom that was dried out. I did soak these with a little bit of vinegar in the water just in case there was any tag-alongs in there to encourage them to exit before I shredded everything up. This is a mandolin, and it is one of my favorite tools in the kitchen. It is very sharp, and so anybody who's ever used this has probably cut their finger on it at least once. But I'm using this for my cabbage because I can get a much finer shred than I can with my food processor. Finally got smart and decided to put this over a bowl. And I used red cabbage in here, even though I think the original is green, just because I don't think there's a huge taste difference, and I just visually thought it would be really pretty to have that red cabbage in here. And I'm doubling this recipe, so I ended up doubling what the recipe that I was following called for. So I'm using about a half a small head of red cabbage. And then this is my Chinese sprouting broccoli from Johnny's, and I love this variety. The stalks are super tender, and it's just really easy to grow. It's a nice early season crop, and then I can take the plants out about now, actually, about mid-June, and then use that area for something else and for my main big heads of broccoli. But this was all straight out of the garden and just tender and delicious. And then this is my Cuisinart food processor. There's nothing wrong with that. That is actually what it looks like. Unfortunately, the one thing I dislike about this food processor is there's no way to adjust the depth of the slicer when you're shredding things. And so there's one size fits all, but I'm just putting those Brussels sprouts into the feeding tube and shredding them up. And I started out with about a pound of Brussels sprouts. I think I ended up with a little bit less because of the stuff I discarded. And then this is red Russian kale. And the best way to deal with this is to just strip it off the stalk with your hands, which is what you see me doing here. And then I'm just going to roll this up into a tight ball and then do what's typically called by chefs a chiffonade, which is a fine shred. And there's a lot of different ways I could have done this. I could have torn these. I could have put it in my food processor. But I thought this would be an easy way to get through this. And these red Russian kale leaves are quite large. And so this is probably about the equivalent of a bunch of kale from the store. I didn't weigh anything. I was just kind of eyeballing it as I went here. And then kale can be fairly tough to chew on. And so I wanted this to be pretty fine. And so I did shred this up fairly small before I mixed it all together. So here we have the kale, there's our Brussels sprouts, and then our broccoli and our cabbage. And then the other thing the recipe called for was a type of chicory, and I didn't have any of that on hand, but I do have a lot of arugula. This is a reseeding arugula bed that's a wild variety of arugula. So not the typical grocery store arugula, and it's right next to my front door, and it just reseeds everywhere. And so I literally had arugula growing in the crack in the sidewalk to my front step, and I needed to get that out of there. And so I just pulled this up by the handfuls. It was pretty strong just because it had started to flower a little bit, but gave that a good chop and a good rinse and a good salad spin. And that was a nice addition instead of the chicory that the recipe originally called for. I think some of the reason that chicory is in there is because it creates loft, and what makes these kind of things go bad in storage is when they're packed together and wet. And so when you throw a chicory in there, it's fluffy. And so basically it keeps everything light and fluffy so that it doesn't pack together and start to get slimy. And because this is a home kitchen and I'm not shipping it across the country, I didn't need to do that. And so the arugula was a fine substitution here. Getting everything mixed. Your hands are your best tool here. And this made a lot. I probably should have not doubled the recipe, but I had a lot of vegetables, and so I wanted to use it up. And then here's the dressing that I ended up using. You see the Costco ingredients there. I subbed better ingredients. So I'm using olive oil, some apple cider vinegar, a little bit of honey. The recipe is in the description below, as always. And then the Costco has some orange juice in it, and this is actually just an orange syrup that I make from orange rinds, kind of like an orange extract. I thought that would be a good way to add a little bit of an orange flavor to that without having to go out and buy an orange out of season. Some lemon juice, some poppy seeds, and I grow my own poppy seeds, salt, a little bit of onion powder, and then giving that a good mix. And the Costco dressing has an emulsifier in it to keep it mixed. There's nothing in this recipe to keep it mixed, and so I ended up adding a little bit of mayonnaise, which can act as an emulsifier. Mustard is also a good use, but I didn't think mustard was what I wanted to put in this dressing. So I added a little bit of mayo to keep that a little bit better mixed. I'm tasting it for seasoning, and this was delicious. It worked out quite well, and then I ended up making a more of a creamy mayonnaise-based one for the rest of the salad because I didn't have nearly enough. Here we have pepitas, which are pumpkin seeds. And my favorite way of toasting nuts is to just put them in my toaster oven on a sheet pan. And you can see they're starting to pop here. And then here is the salad. I actually ended up storing it, and so that we ate it the next day. And I had 2 full containers of this in here. But just gorgeous, really, really pretty to look at and quite delicious to eat. And then the other traditional accompaniments here are dried cranberries, and then our toasted pepitas. And then I used about 2 tablespoons of dressing per salad here. And this came out beautiful. So yeah, this is definitely a keeper and super healthy. I mean, all those brassicas. So give this recipe a try, tribe. Thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week.